Algebra 2, Common Core, Circle Equation Review. This is really geometry topics that you learned last year, but things that you really are expected to know. So that's why we're taking a minute and kind of pausing from Algebra 2 and going back and doing a little geometry review on circle equations, because you're going to need this info for what we're doing next level in Algebra 2. So the equation of a circle, the standard form for the equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. R is your radius. So the center of your circle is represented by hk. And the first thing you need to notice is that in the parentheses we see x minus h or negative h here, but the center is positive h, and y minus k or negative k, and the center is k. So you're going to see an opposite sign relationship there. Like for this first example, because I see x minus 5 and y plus 1, that means the center coordinate is positive 5, not negative 5, positive 5, and not positive 1, negative 1. And over here, now, this x squared doesn't have a number, so what number represents nothing? 0. And y minus 3 means it's going to be positive 3. So the center, that's how we get the center. The radius, well, your equation is equal to r squared, so your radius is going to be the square root of the number over there. So square root of 4 is 2. And your radius here, if I can't do the square root of that number, well, then I leave it as rad 5. So don't think it's half of that. Well, in this case, it is half of that. But sometimes students think they got to divide that by 2, or sometimes they think that just is the radius. But no, you do the square root of what the equation equals, because the equation equals the radius squared. And we want just the radius. Okay, how about this? What's the center and the radius? This equation is not in normal circle center radius form. So we need to rewrite this equation to look something like this so that we can determine its center and radius. And this comes through a process of completing the square, which you should be familiar with. The first step is to organize it or group it. Get the x terms together. So x squared minus 8x, and then the y squared, the y terms together, y squared plus 6y. And then the negative 11 isn't an x term or a y term, so we move it to the other side. It's a constant, so we'll add 11 to the other side, move it to the other side. Remember, if I'm moving something to the other side, I have to do the opposite operation to get it there. So because it's negative 11, I add 11 to both sides. If this was plus 11, then it would be negative 11. Okay, but it's not. All right, so that's the first step of completing the square. As you move the constant to the other side, you organize the problem. Then we do the b divided by 2 squared step. We add that to both sides. The b term, and we have to do this twice because we have to do this for the x's and for the y's. The b term is the term that is attached to the variable to the first. So like a here would be 1, b would be negative 8. A here is 1, b would be 6. So the b term is negative 8 here. Half of that is negative 4. That squares to 16. So x squared minus 8x plus 16. For the y's, still have a plus between them, y squared plus 6y. The yb term is 6. Half of that is 3. Squared is 9. And so I added 16 to the left, and I added 9 to the left. So I also have to add them both to the right. I add 16 and 9. I got to add 16 and 9 on both sides. Then the factoring step. Factoring is factoring the x terms here. As a trinomial, it factors to 2 binomials, but it actually factors to a single binomial squared. It would factor to x minus 4, so I write it as x minus 4 squared. That's why it's called completing the square. It ends up factoring to a square binomial. Plus, and this one's going to factor to y plus 3 squared, because it'd be y plus 3, numbers that multiply to 9, add to 6. The shortcut for that is, it always works out that your b term that we dealt with before, the thing we divided by 2 squared, that just divided by 2, not squared, just divided by 2 is what we end up getting in the parentheses. And then we equal to, just, clean this up over here. 16 and 9 is 25, plus 11 is 36. And then once we're in standard form like this, we can pull out the center. I see as a positive 4, negative 3. Don't forget to do the opposite signs there. And the radius would be 6, the square root of that. Okay, how about going the other way? Given the center, given the center and radius, what's the equation? Well, you just kind of got to do the question backwards. So because it's positive 2, it's going to be x minus 2 squared. Plus, there's always a plus between the parentheses. Why? Because I have a negative 5 plus 5 squared. Because my radius is 6, it equals 36. Square it. Okay, one more question. So this is given the center and radius, what's the equation? How about given the center and a point on the circle, what's the equation? So to write the equation, I need center and radius. Here I gave you both. Here, I'm giving you the center, so we already know the equation is going to be x plus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared. But what we don't know is the radius. And so I don't know the radius, I don't know the radius squared, so I don't know what to put over here. That's where this other point comes in. A radius is the distance between the center and the circle. So if I could find the distance between the center and a point on the circle, that gives me the radius. And I could determine the distance between 2 points by using the distance formula. So the distance formula, which is essentially the Pythagorean theorem, is the difference in the x values squared plus the difference in the y values squared. I said it's like the Pythagorean theorem. Well, the difference in the x values is like this squared, and the difference in the y values is like this squared, and so a squared plus b squared gives me c squared, the distance here. And then I do the square root of it to get c. So it really is the Pythagorean theorem, just with coordinates. So here's your distance formula. We substitute this info in. And let's see, that would be negative 2 minus 2 squared plus 3 minus 6 squared. The difference between negative 2 and positive 2 is negative 4. It doesn't matter that it's negative because it's going to square positive to 16. The difference between 3 and 6 is negative 3. It doesn't matter that it's negative. It's going to square to positive. 9 and 16 is 25. The square root of all this, the distance between these points is 5. So the radius of this circle is 5, which means in the answer up there, I do not put a 5, I put a 25, because don't forget it's the radius squared. So many students do this question beautifully. They get all this, and then they just set it equal to 5. The radius is not what goes there. The radius squared goes there. So don't forget about that piece of it too. So this is a little bit of circle review, especially this completing the square question. You're going to see that a few times when we get into solving more complicated systems, like where a circle and a line cross and things like that. So you need to know this info, not just for geometry, but also for this course as well. See ya.